Top the middle of the windy day to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do a little taste test comparison. We last saw, this is Mr. Green's 660. We kind of did a little rework on that saw, and we ran it against a stock 661 that is one of the new version, at least new to North American standards. Essentially, it has a limited coil, but it has an adjustable carburetor on it. That'd be the saw on the right. And then we're going to run it. I'm throwing this into the mix just because I thought it'd be kind of interesting. That is the 661 that was seen pulling the 6-foot bar. That saw was gnawing on an old redwood chunk. We're talking 199 drivers of 404 chain. The chain weighs over 5 pounds just by itself. So we know that saw has good low end power. That's probably one of the early kind of torque tweak saws I was working on from the summer before last, actually. So now we're looking at coming up on about a year and a half, I guess. That was one of the very first saws that I tried the torque tweak on, was this 661 right here. It started life as an Amtronic, as you can see, but it's now sporting a adjustable carburetor and a, well, it's got an unlimited coil essentially at this point. So I got rid of the Amtronic monkey business and just kind of checking that thing out. There is one thing that I have to mention in this process. So I've never seen this situation before. Right next to the spring in the front, we can see the case gaskets coming out. It's the first time I've ever saw something quite that impressive on a saw. I've never seen it on a Husqvarna. I just thought I'd make mention of that right there. I'm thinking you can see the case gasket hanging out right there. So this saw pulls a 3-foot bar with authority. It's the same saw that we watched in the video with the 880 that was pulling that long roller nose from, I don't know, a while ago anyway. Pretty nice redwood. But anyway, I digress. So everything's pretty much warmed up. We'll re-warm up and we'll reevaluate on the 660. Same bar and chain as before. 32-inch Stihl lightweight and some full comp. It's actually Windsor chain. Let us begin. I'm kind of wondering who's going to get the short end of the stick, whether it's going to be the 660 or not. Like I said, the end of the crank broke off on this saw actually, so put a new crank in it, bearings, seals, and I kind of reworked the top end a little bit on this saw. I think I'd built this saw a couple years ago for Mr. Green. So yeah, a little bit of R&D tweaking over the last few years, so I kind of did a little rework on the top end, minor tweaks, but as we can see, it takes two of us to lift this chunk up. I can't do it by myself, so it's pretty heavy, and we're able to pull hard enough to leverage it up and over a little bit. We were watching it go that way, so yeah, I'm kind of curious, see how it works out. If we want to check it out, the description's going to have the timed runs, but this is the same bar and chain I mentioned that earlier as before. We're going to check the stops real quick just because, see where they're at. You can see we got a 0 operation going here. One thing I noticed, it's hard when you go from one side to the other. But yeah, they're down around the mid 50s or something. I think we established that last time actually, when we ran the stock standard 661. So they're about 52 on both sides, but I got lucky there because I'm doing it by hand. So I guess we can talk a little bit while I bumble through the bar change in this operation. Now we're going to interject a little snippet here in a second. If there's kind of a question on whether or not I'm kind of going after low end or not, we watched the two 661s bumping around on the ground. We'll go there now. So if there's any kind of a curiosity on if those saws have a lot of compression, I guess, essentially. Talk about modifying the combustion chamber, throwing in the flow enhancement tricks to work with that, and lo and behold, they hit pretty good. You wouldn't want to leave one on your tailgate because you're going to end up losing it onto the ground, essentially. The other thing that I like about this 661 is because it's a standard, it doesn't have any of that M-tronic monkey business on it, and you can actually tune the carburetor, because I know that in the summer times around here, and we're a little under 3,000 feet in elevation, when it's about 80, starting about 80 degrees or something, they actually don't really want to run that well in the M-tronic form. 4,000 they're really struggling, 5,000 leave them in the truck. That'd be the M-tronic version. With the standard, you can adjust the carburetor and compensate for that. So I'm actually kind of well pleased. This is going to be more of a long bar saw than that 500i. It's much stiffer. You can run a long bar on it and not have to worry about the spring mounts too much. As we saw, I had a 72-inch on that other one, and of course you have to be gentle wielding that much bar around, but it wasn't like it tore the mounts out or anything, I wouldn't even think about doing that on a 500i. So the 661 sounds like it's going to stay in the lineup, actually, which is really sweet since they introduced the standard into North America just pretty recently. I think it was actually right after the 500i came out, or maybe it was just a fuzz before. I'm not actually positive yet on that. Maybe it was just like a couple weeks before the 500i they introduced the standard into America. Well, into North America, I guess. Although I don't know for sure if the Canadians have that saw in their lineup yet or not, but I'm sure that they will at some point. The other thing that I'm going to say is all these saws, you can control the carburetor, and it's going to be a pretty fair shootout. We're not going to run this 661 up too high because we haven't actually, it's only been through a couple heat cycles at this point. I don't want to like put the hurt on it too bad. But the one thing about the cylinder design in the standard, this is made by Stihl themselves. It's not the Italian version that's coming on the MS661Cs. I thought that was interesting. The standard version has a quote-unquote Stihl-made cylinder, I guess assembly, because they're making the pistons themselves anyway. So little tidbits here. The carburetor's a little bit different as well, but I didn't really notice anything else as far as like design-wise. Alrighty, we managed to get the bar swapped out, completely warmed up with the standard version. Okay, so I'm thinking that the standard 661 got the brunt of it so far. I think it's about 23 and a half by about 23 or so. So it's a pretty good sized round. It seemed like I was able to put some more pressure on the handlebar coming up. We watched that log get leveraged over even more so than with the 660. Part of that's going to be the cylinder design. It's a quad loop system in the 661s. It's the old style double loop in the 660s. So even though the stroke is a lot longer in the 660s, the engine design's a little bit different in the 661s. It actually lends itself for good torque, even though it's got a 3mm stroke coming in at 37. So 56mm bore versus the 54mm bore in the 660. So throwing little tidbits out there. So we're going to do the bar change on the Mondo 661. We're going to have to see how that saw does with a 32. I've never even run a bar that short on it at this point. It's been 3 foot or bust, I guess, essentially. My prediction is I'm going to be able to leverage or lean on that saw a lot more than even this saw, and we're going to see what happens. One of the very first torque monster saws, period, was this one. I think I mentioned that earlier. We watched the 661, the standard, bouncing around on the ground right over there to the right, and now we'll take a look at this saw bouncing around right over there to the right. So for a work saw, I'm looking for low end power more than anything on a personal level. Kind of why I got on the torque monster kick. We're going to have to do some high winder stuff here, because that was actually where I went initially about 20 years ago, was down the high winder road, but that doesn't really get them off the stump quick necessarily. The torque is what gets them off the stump. In a work saw, you want that more than anything, at least in my humble opinion. All right, here we go. Alrighty, so got a hand getting that all put back together. I thought we might as well give that thing a run and see, without actually leaning in it too bad, if we can get a couple cuts through it and see how they compare. We can integrate this in actually before the last part of it, but here we go. Okay, that chunk weighs over 100 pounds still, and we watched at the last little section in the top, it grabbed a hold of it and twisted it on there. I had propped up the legs, leveraged it this way a little bit, hoping to keep it a little bit under control. I think that helped a little bit, but we kind of talked about the time runs a little bit. They're kind of inconclusive in a way. If you want to think about it, you can't really tell through the computer thermometer how a soft feels. You can only watch and listen to how it sounds. What I can tell you is this 661 right here that I lost all the M-tronic stuff on a couple years ago, or 3 years ago, whatever that was now, probably 3 years ago. I don't even know, a long time ago. It's definitely has more low end power. That's what you get when you're trying to go on the torque kick, I guess, and it gives you good low end power. If you're stumping, you want low end power, in my humble opinion, not change speed necessarily, but that's just what I think, and that's the way I've tuned my saws for quite some time. I initially went on the RPM kick 20 years ago or whatever. We're gonna have to build a high winder. I got one project I got to get handled here pretty soon for Mr. Speed and Marine. High winder situation, so that'll be a fun little project. But most of the time I'm building work saws with good low end power. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. You can tell by the fact that they're leveraging, you know, 100, 200 pound logs. You're leveraging them up. It's kind of not really bogging the saw down at all. They still just keep motoring along. So anyway, kind of a long-winded session. Thanks to Mr. Green for allowing me to have his 660, the little retune. I think it actually helped. It's still in the lowest state of tune. I think I forgot to mention that. That thing's only probably like, it's not at the same level. It's about a step down, step and a half or something maybe, I'm not sure. It's from several years ago. As the R&D process goes along, you tweak stuff, modify, change, alter, and you get a little bit more performance out of them. As a result, the 660 doesn't run quite as good as the 661s, but it's not taken quite as far either. So there's that one. Mr. Hansen was kind of all about trying one of the new North American version 661 standards, as well as I was. We mentioned early on that that cylinder, the actual cylinder itself, isn't made in Italy. I'm not sure if it's made in Italy or not, but it's got the Stihl insignia on the side of the cylinder. It doesn't have the Giladoni or whatever, however you say that Italian name, that's been building the cylinders for the M-tronic saws and the 461s. This one doesn't have that Italian name on it. I did notice that. Mentioned the carburetor's a little bit different. I kind of like this saw actually. So anyway, long-winded session. Thanks for enduring. Have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.